Welcome to the second ABSL IT Club by Ministry of Programming event in this year. We are glad to welcome you all for another exciting topic that we're going to discuss this morning. And this morning we're speaking about a rather important topic generally in the digital world, not only in the IT industry, and that's cybersecurity. So I will remind you that you are allowed to ask questions for the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar in the chat room during the presentation, and of course when the time comes for the Q&A at the end. And it is my pleasure today to welcome two experts coming from Ministry of Programming when it comes to cybersecurity, Branko Petrović and Duško Bajović. And I'll let the floor to our guest speakers for today to introduce themselves and of course to start. But just a quick reminder again on the housekeeping rule, please keep your cameras and microphones muted during the presentation and enjoy, of course.
Okay, so hello everyone from me. I'm Branko Petrović, a Security and Privacy Officer at Ministry of Programming. Me and my colleague Duško today will present you and share with you some experience what we already have in cybersecurity field. So please, Duško, do introduction about yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Duško. I am VP of Engineering at Ministry of Programming, working in this industry for some 12 years. And today I'm about to talk about security from the perspective of software developer point of view. Thanks.
Can you confirm me that we can start with the presentation?
Of course, you may start. Thank you for the introduction.
Okay, so thank you for attending to this webinar. Today we will talk about cybersecurity, and what is our opinion is that our security starts with code. So your security starts with your code. Today's webinar we split it on 4 key topics. First one is why is cybersecurity important for your business? Second one, start with your code. You will know more about that later. Third one is protect your company through 7 security layers, and company and compliance, like last key topic what we will talk on this webinar. So why is cybersecurity important for you and of course your business? As we wrote here, it doesn't matter whether are you an employee, startup, small business or enterprise. You really on data and technology every day. So because of that, you need to take care about your cybersecurity. The first reason why is that important is because of continuous workflow. Because you need to, your workflow should be smooth and normal and continuous. And the importance of cybersecurity is to reflect, in fact, to enable all of that. So I will take one example. Imagine that some black hat hacker encrypts your data and you don't have a backup or some other data loss prevention solution, and you cannot access to that data. Your workflow is stopped and blocked there. So because of that, you should think about cybersecurity. Another reason is costs. Lack of focus on cybersecurity can damage your business in a range of ways, including economic costs, reputational costs, or regulation costs. When we talk about economic costs, we can, I will take another example. Like if you're a resale shop application, like you have online e-commerce application, and you are under the big DDoS attack on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, your consumers, they will not wait for you. They will just go to another one, and they will spend their money on another shop, and you will lost that money, like that revenue what you planned to have on that day on Black Friday. So it's some kind of indirect cost, but it's a very huge. It can be very huge problem for your business. And the last one what we mentioned here is reputation. That because of cyber incident like data leak or some other exposure, you can lose your clients, consumers, trust, current and future, of course, customers or clients, and you will have a poor media coverage about that. So those three reasons are not only one, but we mentioned that here because they are very important from our perspective. Now we will switch on the next topic, and that is start with your code. Duško, can you continue?
Thank you, Branko. So when it comes to the security, we always have to think of where the security origin is, and it's in the code. So we as software developers have to pay attention on how we code and develop our solutions in order to make them secured properly. So if we look at the next slide, Branko, can you please?
Yes.
We have we always talk about the code base security analysis. So every software developer has certain knowledge about the security, but nowadays we have so many tools that can help us with it, so that we can focus on building or solving the problem of the domain of our product, while the security is checked by these tools, more or less. When talking about the tools and the integration, we usually think about static application security testing, or shortened it's SAST. These tools are used for the analysis of the code base twofold. First, it can be integrated as a plugin on the development environment, such as, I don't know, Visual Studio Code, or IntelliJ. But the point is, these tools can help us by checking our code base in real time to avoid implementing some exploits or flows in our code base. But more powerful part of this is having the static application security testing as part of your CI/CD setup. So when we talk about the CI/CD setup, we are usually think about the pipelines when we push our code to the Git or some other version control system, and it start executing some actions. Some of these actions might be executing unit tests or integration tests as part of our code base, but another part can be also executing SAST as part of our build pipeline. Why is this important? Well, because when we create a pull request on our Git repository, we will run the security analysis of our code base, and we will figure out whether our code base has some flaws. If something is detected, we will not allow pull requests to be merged into the master branch, for example, unless everything is fixed properly. Once it's merged into the master branch and is ready to be deployed, we run the security analysis once again. Why? Well, because we have so many different branches merged into the master branch, and we have to analyze the code base when everything is kind of joined together. And if everything is okay, then we are also all right by moving into deployment to the production. If something is again detected, then we will make sure to fix those before we move to production. But how do we detect those things? Well, as a community of engineers globally, we have a couple of standards that we follow, or more or less lists of vulnerabilities that we have to pay attention to. Two most common are OWASP or OWASP Top 10, which is basically web application security or list of vulnerabilities that web applications are prone to. And the paragraph that you can see on this slide says that OWASP Top 10 is a standard awareness document for developers and web application security. It's a broad consensus about most security critical risks to web applications. Why is this important? Well, nowadays we develop web applications mostly, and at least those top 10 security vulnerabilities that we introduce, we should check for those. As part of static code analysis, we will check for these top 10 vulnerabilities and see whether we introduce some of them. Comparing to OWASP Top 10, we also have CVE and CWE, where we are focusing on CVE commonly, and that says common vulnerabilities and exposures. What's the link between CVE and CWE? That's also kind of a source of confusion. CVE cannot exist without CWE, where CWE is just common weakness enumeration. And you might remember one of the most known vulnerabilities lately is the Log4j library that was exposing the whole server to the attacker. So whole exploit of the server was possible through simple Java logging library, and you can find the CVE link, CVE ID. It's a CV-2021-44228, and it is linked to the CWE 502. Why is this important? Well, because every tool that is running static analysis of our code base is pooling this list in a real time. At a moment when Log4j exploit was detected, CV entry was created, and in the moment of checking our code base for these vulnerabilities, we would be alarmed instantly about this vulnerability in our code base. That kind of decreases the risk of pushing the code that is easily exploitable by malicious persons. Comparing to static application security testing, we also have dynamic application security testing. I'm not focusing to dynamic security testing now because it's a bit out of the developer context, because it requires setup and manual interventions to run. But basically the difference between static and dynamic security testing is that static testing is running on the source code, while the dynamic testing is running on the executable files or live production environment by testing, I don't know, for example, API endpoints for buffer overflows or something like that. Can we move to the next slide, Branko, please? Again, from the developer perspective, there are a couple of things worth mentioning. First, do not re-implement the wheel, period. And that's by focusing on the following things. In our products, we commonly implement user authentication. So user has to log in to do something. It's so common feature that we do not have to implement it from scratch. First, if we are doing from scratch, we will most probably introduce some security risk or flow, something that we are not aware of. There are standards like OAuth 2 and identity provider implementations in form of libraries that you can implement in your code base and have it as a kind of off-the-shelf solution for forget password functionalities, reset password, login, secured storing of password data in database, and so on. When it comes to the data encryption, when you have a need to encrypt the data in your database, don't do it by implementing your algorithms from scratch. Encryption algorithms are mathematically proven that cannot be broken in a real time, or at least in some reasonable amount of time. Therefore, use the encryption algorithms that are proven and on millions of products, as well as mathematically proven to be secured. One of the common flaws in our products is that we pay attention to the code base, security, and all these flows and everything, but we forget from the infrastructure point of view to protect the database server. Database server usually, but what happens is that it is approachable from the internet. So it is on 0000 IP address. That means that our product can be secure, but someone can execute a DDoS attack on the database server and effectively making our product unavailable. This is easily solved by putting database server into private network in cloud environment where only our application can access to that database server. And when it comes to the cloud environment, one of the common flows is that we access cloud from the internet, while instead we should bring up the VPN connection between our machine and the cloud environment and accessing cloud only through the VPN. That completely shuts down the whole world from our environment, and then we are much more secure. And yes, now we've been talking about the infrastructure. Now we are talking about one of the common mistakes that developer itself creates. First thing is managing credentials. And when talking about credentials, I'm talking about service credentials, the credentials that our product is using. So what happens in practice is that we have a couple of environments like dev, staging, pre-production, and production, for example. And everyone's are thinking about the production only. But dev, it's for us, but still dev is a public one. And what we do, we push credentials for them in dev environment into the Git repository, giving it in a plain text to everyone that can read that. Yes, maybe not everyone publicly can read that, but at least someone from within the company can read those credentials. And you cannot assume that someone from within the company might have some malicious actions to execute. When it comes to storing passwords in the database, it's already common thing, but hashing passwords is a must-have. Passwords in clear text are a huge no-no. Access to the cloud services should be done through personal accounts so that we have an audit, but also granular control over permissions, while having administrative domain accounts protected in a password vault. And when talking about the management of the passwords, we divide it into two things. Please use password managers for personal and administrative account. And please implement password vaults for your products. So do not hard code passwords or some sort of credentials. Every cloud service today provides some sort of password vault, such as AWS Security Manager or HashiCorp Vault, or whatever cloud provider you are using. There is some solution that will avoid leakage of credentials publicly. So that's about it from my side now. And now I'm going to switch to Branko to continue on 7 pillars. Thank you.
So when we talk about company cybersecurity and cybersecurity in general, we cannot talk about it without mentioning some frameworks and methodologies such as the NIST framework, privacy by design, CA triad, etc. But my favorite one is 7 layers of cybersecurity. And I will go first through those 7 layers, and that is first one is mission critical assets. You can read it like data. Second one is data security. Third one, application security, endpoint security, network security, perimeter security, and last one is the human layer. And the last one is the biggest one when we talk about those 7 cybersecurity layers. These 7 security layers should center on the mission critical assets or data you seek to protect, And thanks to them, your data is achieved by the CIA triad, and that is we don't think about CIA isn't in this moment isn't security agency of America. It's confidential, integrity, and availability. What is most important, what you need to have, like when we talk about security data. So how we use it? Here we give you like a simple solution what you should do with this. So if you ask yourself how to use this framework inside your company, this is some kind of solution. Our suggestion is that you should implement at a minimum one mechanism per layer, and all those layers should be one level of security. So when you done with that, when you define, set up, implement some mechanism inside these 7 layers, you can say that that you complete one cybersecurity level, and after what you should move on the next level, and again from the first security layer, that is mission critical assets, to the last one, that is a human layer. So here are our suggestions for first level. So if you are building from scratch cybersecurity in your company, first mission critical assets, we should define what you need to protect. So on next slide we will talk about this more. Second one is data security. So first mechanism, what you should have is backup. So you should set up some data loss prevention solution, or if you have an opportunity, you should do something more about encrypting your data. Third one, application security, secure coding, what my colleague Duško already mentioned. So he already covered this topic. I will not say anything more about this. Fourth is endpoint security. So for purpose of this layer, you could set up some anti-malware solution on your company endpoints. For fifth layer, our suggestion is to set up OpenDNS as default DNS on your company wireless router and install a firewall inside that router, or take a new one. The next thing that you could do as a part of the sixth layer, cybersecurity layer, is that implement a system to control entry into the company space, like NFC for each doors, doors, outside doors for your company. And for seven and last layer, what is a human layer, you can do a lot of things, but education should be the main activity, what you should do. So educate your colleagues, your employees about all those 7 layers and everything about cybersecurity, because education is most important in your cybersecurity level. And for purpose of this webinar, I will tell you something more about first cybersecurity layer, and that is mission critical assets. What you should do, what should be your first task, and that is that you should define what you need to protect. So all of us need to protect the data, and if you are already if you aren't already classified and define data categories in your company, you should do immediately. How you could do that? Here is an example of 3 data categories: consumer data, client data, and corporate data. In consumer data, that is personal data, sensitive data, or under the GDPR, they are also called special category of data. Then you should define client data. What is your client data? That is like source code. If you are like software development company who who work with some clients and developing a software application for that client, credentials, contracts with them, finance data, etc. And also corporate data. This corporate is maybe isn't a good term for your company, but corporate data is company's data, and in that we can include like employees data, intellectual or innovation project data, finance data, and etc. And I already mentioned that you should classify data, and you can do that with like 3 very popular levels of data classification, that is like public data, internal data, and confidential data. Okay, compliance. Duško.
Yeah, so when we talk about the security from the software developer point of view, we also have to touch the compliance part as well. So depending on what kind of products we are developing, our products is prone to some sort of compliances. GDPR is the most common one, and I'm going to skip it completely at the moment because Branko will kind of go through it thoroughly. But for example, if we are developing financial applications or some application that is kind of responsible for the payment processing of the card transactions, connecting to the Visa or MasterCard directly, we have to be PCI DSS compliant. Every payment processor today, such as, I don't know, PayPal or Stripe or Klarna, whatever, they are PCI DSS compliant, and by implementing their checkout forms and stuff, we are protected by the PCI DSS scope because they are compliant. But sometimes we are developing products such as Stripe, for example, and therefore we have to make sure that we are compliant with guidelines that this kind of standard provides. And for example, for PCI DSS, you have to protect the cardholder data. So card number or the CVS number should not be leaked. They should be encrypted in the database. You should not leak those data through loggers and stuff like that. And for PCI DSS, there are actually official auditors that you have to go through in order to get a stamp that you are compliant. HIPAA is kind of active in the USA, so it's not a global standard, but it's a similar thing for the health kind of data, protecting the data from patients in the health system in the USA. ISO 27001 is a security standard that companies have to implement when they are working with some, for example, again, financial institutions or anyone else that is requiring that you are compliant or certified with ISO 27001. Why is this important? Well, because these are standard things. And if we are certified with this standard, that means that our level of security procedures, data protections is on the level that someone else accepts. We can say that we are, but if we don't have a certification or stamp, then it's kind of pointless. So no one will trust us. This is really important when we are kind of working with huge, I don't know, investment funds or some other companies that are basically regulated this way. So being aware of the compliances is important from software developer point of view, because during code implementation, we have to make sure that we don't leak data. And for example, one of the common ways of data leakage is, as I mentioned, through loggers. Because when we, for example, implement a middleware for the API, then we log all the requests and responses. And we are not thinking about, hey, are there some sensitive data in that response? And that way, we might easily leak card number without even thinking about it, regardless of having that column encrypted in the database. That's why it's important to have the awareness of your product and the compliances that your product requires, and to educate yourself or ask of the company to educate yourself over these compliance standards. So Branko, to you for the GDPR.
Yeah, so everyone, I think, know what is GDPR, but I should mention that GDPR is a privacy and security law, which protects the privacy of data of EU citizens and residents all over the world. And the GDPR was the first in this kind of regulation in the world. Now, these days, USA, USA trying to have their own GDPR, and they call it Consumer Privacy Act. And a couple of countries, there are states already adopt that Consumer Privacy Act. So when does the GDPR apply to us? If we are processing some personal data of EU citizens, we should be compliant with GDPR. But if we ask me, should we start first with GDPR or some other standard or some other regulation, I will tell you that you should start with ISO 27001, and after that you should go to GDPR. Why is that? Because Duško already mentioned, and that is ISO is very good. ISO 27001 is very good standard, and it cover very huge number of privacy procedures, policies for GDPR. So it will help you to be GDPR compliant on the first step for you. And when we talk about why cybersecurity is important, and when I mentioned the costs, I didn't mention the costs of regulation. I waited for this slide where I want to say that GDPR is very popular in the media, especially last year when they give the very big fines for some big companies in the world. And I want to say that there are two tiers of fines, which is max out at 20 million euros or 4% of global revenue, whichever is higher. And of course, plus data subject have the right to seek compensation for damage if you make damage for data subject, what is the EU citizens, which data you are processed. So that is for us for this webinar what we want to present you. Now we should switch on section for questions and answers. So do you have any questions for us? Please write it in chat. Okay, Adi.
So far, I can see we have no questions in the chat room, but we received a question in our application form. And it says, when it comes to cybersecurity, how often should you perform patch management?
Okay, so when we talk about patch management, first we should know that there is a difference between companies who are using cloud services and who have their own data center, so like using some kind of on-premise services. So but in these two kind of services, what we are as a company using, we are responsible for patching that servers or instances what we are using. So when we talk about patch management, we need to know that we have like normal patch management, like standard patch management. When we are doing that, when we are, Duško mentioned CVE, when we are following that, and when we see that there is some kind of vulnerability or something like that, we should do the patch management, or our vendor notice us like, okay, we have new patch and you should do patching your service. But if there is like Log4j, what Duško already mentioned, again, we should have like patch management in some kind of incident response when we want to proactive do the patching our servers, our instances, to prevent if we have to prevent to having a problem issue with some vulnerability what is exposed globally.
Thank you very much. We haven't received any more questions in the chat room, but I will use the opportunity to say to our attendees, if there are any further questions or feedbacks regarding today's IT Club meeting, feel free to contact us on our email info@absl.ba, or write it in the comment section at the survey that members will receive in the upcoming days. And I would like to thank you, Branko and Duško, for a very insightful presentation today. That was also easy to understand for someone that is not coming from the tech world. I'm talking about myself. So it was really insightful and useful to get to know how also companies should approach the topic of cybersecurity. And I think the audience will agree. This meeting will be available to ABSL members, of course, from our internal database for rewatching for those ones who weren't attending. And once again, we'll introduce the next IT Club event in the upcoming days. Stay tuned, because what I can say right now is that MOP is preparing more insightful events that are also expert, but some of them will also be fun related when it comes to the IT world and companies. Once again, Branko, Duško, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for calling us, and of course, thanks everyone for their attendance of this webinar.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to participate.
Thank you. Until the next opportunity, follow ABSL and Ministry of Programming on social media for updates.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.